take our seats, please. A wintry good morning to you all. Good morning. Morning. I will call this Waupaca County Board of Supervisors meeting to order on this Tuesday, February 18th. Please press your roll call buttons.
Roll call shows 23 members present.
This meeting and all other meetings are open to the public. Proper notice has been posted and given to the press in accordance with the Wisconsin state statutes, so the citizenry may be aware of the time, place, and the agenda of this meeting. Next, we'd like a motion to approve the agenda before us. There's a motion by Mr. Zog. There's a second by Mr. Muck. Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 23-0.
As you have minutes in your packet that was sent to you, we need to approve of the minutes of the past meeting. There is a motion by Supervisor Craig, and a second by Supervisor Lloyd Mares. Any discussion or questions on this past minutes? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Chairman, don't we say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore?
Last chance to vote. Motion carried 23-0.
That's a good point, Mr. Penny. And with that being said, please join me in a moment of silent meditation and the Pledge of Allegiance. And please remember at this time, one of our own, Gene Sorensen, who had some surgery and is in recovery. And we remember him in your prayers and thoughts. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Penny, for the reminder. It's come to my attention that this morning I walked in the door with him that our longtime supervisor, Lloyd Mares' last meeting is today because he was, I think you're heading south for a bit, aren't you? That's right. Well deserved, for sure. And it's really a sad thing to see you leave, Lloyd. You've done a remarkable job on this county board for years. You've been proactive, you've been positive. It's been a great time working with you. And when you come back, don't be a stranger, stop by, okay? You betcha. And one other thing, before I forget that too at the end, I don't see Mr. Colas here, but I sure want to congratulate, we want to congratulate Mr. Mike Colas of his tremendous he's a full-fledged tenured professor for the UW extension system now. He went through the grueling process and no trouble at all. And he's a full-fledged professor, as is Greg Blondie of our UW extension, which I didn't know. So that's a great honor. And Mike isn't here for us to give him a hand, but when you see him, congratulate him. Item number 7, we have Infinity Metals, LLC of Clintonville, RLF application, and our WCEDC president, Lisa Kuss, is going to come forth along with Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Keppen. On behalf of the WCEDC, normally you know that Dave Teal is here. He was unavailable to come today, and so in his absence as president of the board, I am here. because I don't often get to come and talk to you about these loans, I do want to thank the board here from the county that supports these loans. This program is important for businesses all over our county. You've always been very supportive of that, and we appreciate that. Certainly, we have many successes that we can show you through that revolving loan. Sometimes we take risks that don't always pan out, but if you look at our portfolio that Dave oversees in that loan pool with the assistance of Heidi here, there's a lot of successes, and those jobs, which is really our focus as economic development people, on behalf of our communities locally, like Clintonville, where I'm from, as you know, and the county board, we want to thank you. So the reason that we're here today, as Mr. Keppen explained, is Infinity Metals. For those of you that have been in our Clintonville area, they are doing business previously as Utility Tool and Trailer. And Michael Jensen, the current owner of what is now called Infinity Metals, is going to talk to you for about 5 minutes about some of their plans. But we're very excited that as the committees have reviewed this prior to it coming before the full county board, we are all recommending a $100,000 loan from the county loan pool at 4% for 7 years, and that's based on the next 3 years projecting 42 new jobs, which is important, obviously, in my community that I represent in Clintonville. The city council always wants to partner with the county, and our maximum amount of our loans is $50,000, and so we have already approved last week, Tuesday, at our city council meeting, a $50,000 loan. So while we're asking you on behalf of the EDC to support this, we also want you to know that at a local level, we are also supporting it at the max that we're allowed to give. And so I'll turn it over to Michael for a few minutes to talk to you about it, and then are hoping that based on the recommendation of the Finance Committee that the county board will approve this loan. So go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Lisa, and Mr. Keppen, thank you. I guess just to preface things a little bit, Lisa had mentioned that, you know, this revolving loan program has had its successes and its failures. And, you know, one thing that I want to point out is that the successes far outweigh the failures to the individual people that gain jobs through the programs. And that's the big thing about this program, is that it allows businesses like ours to be able to acquire machinery and equipment to add jobs to the community. A little bit, just really briefly about my history. I started out, I graduated from Marquette College in 1982. Worked in Shawano, Wisconsin at Aerocast. My father started that, and I took over the ownership of Aerocast in 1985 and ran that from 1985 through 2005. And we grew that business from 1985. We started out with 35 employees and about $4 million in sales. In 2005, when we sold that business, we had 450 employees and had 120 million in sales. So over those 25 years, the team that I put together, I'm not taking credit for the overall success of that company, because it's a team of people that you put together, and the team that you bring together that really create the success in a company. And so that being said, over that 25 years, we did a $750,000 same block community development loan with the Shawano County, and then 750 with the city, we obviously paid those back. And over the span of the 25 years, I think that we borrowed or had lent to us over the years about $40 million for different expansion projects that we did, and we paid all of those back. And so we have a good track record, never have defaulted on a loan. So that should give you some comfort in knowing that we have experience in this area. The neat thing about Utility Tool and Trailer, now known as Infinity Metals, it has a rich history in Clintonville. 88 years now, somewhere around 88 years the company has been located in Clintonville. And my wife and I, Shannon, have been involved in the business now for about 2.5 years, and we bought the last partner out this last, I guess, in about May of 2013, and so and in that time, I guess since May, we've had about $6.5 million worth of improvements. We've personally put in approximately $2 million of our own money, so we're vested in this program. We aren't, we did that in advance before we came here, and we've working with the bank in Waupaca, First National Bank, Waupaca. Sorry about that. I work with Don Sorensen, a great guy, and with this next phase of expansion that we're doing, we're adding a welding cell. We're a fabricator, so in June we absorbed a machine shop that gave us about 25 CNC machines. So we have the capability of if anyone's familiar with manufacturing, we can do the CNC machining, we can do the laser cutting, we can do the bending of the metal, and then we're using robotic welding to weld the metal together, and then we have a full wet paint system, and the utility tool and trailer entity still remains, and we still do the military sales that the company has really specialized in the last like 30 years. And what we're doing presently is building the really commercial sales or job shop sales and the machining end of things in the fabricating, and that gives us some diversity. We're still going to work on the military end of things, and the problem is that the military contracts go up and down, and the commercial end of things are more consistent, and so we're trying to stabilize things for our workforce, so we don't see that the up and downs that we've experienced over the past 15 or 20 years with the military sales. When you get a contract, you hire a lot of people, and when the contract runs out, you end up laying off people, and that's not good for anyone, because you spend a lot of time training people. So we're looking for more consistent sales. At my experience at Aerocast, I'm used to growing the company 20% a year, and I did that over 25 years, so that's what I'm looking to do with this company. And the way that I think that we can do that is, again, with this next phase, we're adding a robotic welding machine, which will be the largest welding cell in the country. And that's kind of the same thing that we did at Aerocast. As I mentioned with the Finance Committee, I'm sure that all of you in Waupaca are familiar with the foundry business, and we actually at Aerocast carved out a niche where we had a flash size with an expansion that we did that opened up $100 million in sales for us, with a mold size that was 5 foot by 7 foot and 12 or 24 inches over 24 inches. So it had 12,000 pounds of sand in the cope and 12,000 pounds of sand in the drag, or the two halves of the mold. And that really carved out a niche for us to do things that really no other foundry could do in the country. And I'm just trying to relate my past experience to the present experience, and why I think that we're going the right direction with this company. And when I started talking about the robotic welding cell that we're adding, there's a lot of machine shops, there's a lot of fabricators, in the area, and what's going to differentiate us is this welding cell, because it's a double gantry. So you have two long gantry systems with robots with 12-foot arms hanging from these gantries, and it's 50 foot long, and it's 12 foot wide and 12 foot tall. So we'll be able to weld huge pieces of equipment welding. If you look at one of the things we're looking at in this second phase is acquiring a heavy haul trailer manufacturer that specializes with the Stinger application. This all gets really technical, but anyway, if you look at these heavy haul trailers that you see hauling huge pieces of equipment that are 110 feet long, and because you often when you go down the road because you have to stop or let them go around you or whatever. But so every one of those components in that 110 foot long trailer, none of those components are more than 50 feet or 30 feet long. So they will be able to fit inside this welding cell. So that opens up a whole market for us. And I believe by adding this welding cell will differentiate us, as I said, and allow us to grow the business and be a long-term stable employer in the county. And I think that there's probably information. I don't know how much information we've passed out to everyone. But I'm open to have any questions that anybody might like to have about what we're doing, the direction we're taking, about our business.
Questions for Mr. Jensen? I don't see any. Michael, this was presented to our Finance Committee and approved, as Ms. Quist said. So I commend you on the success you had at Aerocast. I am in business in Shawano and watched Aerocast grow through the years, and I didn't know it was because of your managership. So it turned out to be quite an industry, and surely wish you well in Clintonville if we approve this loan. I'll entertain a motion for approval. There's a motion by Mr. Kussman and a second by Mr. Handrick. Any other questions for Michael? Seeing none, please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 23-0.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you to the board.
Thank you, Ms. Kuz, and thank you, Mr. Jensen, for coming.
The only thing I like to say, Mr. Chairman, is Lisa Quist has almost got the industrial park in Clintonville filled up, and she said as soon as she does, she's gonna come to Waupaca and help us out.
I think the radio caught that too. Okay, the next item here, the code red, is not going to be presented today because his flight was canceled. So we will have that probably next month, if the weather's better and the planes are in the air. We'll have a Lakeview Manor update with Melissa Drews.
Good morning. We kind of ran short with some of the handouts, and Carrie has some in the back. If you have, if some of you didn't get this handout, she will certainly be willing to hand it out to you now, because we had to make some more copies. I thought I had enough, and I'm blaming it on the copy machine. It was not the user this time. I don't care what anybody says. So, one of the things that at the last meeting was you, the county board supervisors, kind of requested to keep updated on the project that we have going and where we're at and what's going on. So what we talked about the last time I was here was what the units looked like, and I said I would bring to you the costs because we did not have them at that time. So what you have in front of you is that cost that we were talking about. The whole project came in at 1.36, so that turned out very well, much as we thought it would. The first one of the handout you have there is Wing A. If you look at the one, it says Wing A, and it came in at $630,000. The reason that came in at that number, the few things that are added in there, they're moving walls, relocating walls. There's not as much plumbing in this unit. This 630,000 includes the outside, the entrance, and beautifying that entrance, as well as the sidewalk. And also included in this is resurfacing the parking lot, the back parking lot. So that is included in that. So that came in at 630. Then Wing D came in at 709. The reason that came in more is because a lot of plumbing, because each room will have its own private bath. So there's a lot of plumbing involved in that. And then the other thing that is involved in that is actually moving windows and purchasing new windows for that unit. That'll be a really good start for us because, quite frankly, every window in the building needs to be replaced. It's losing its seals and it's clouding up, and it certainly is not energy efficient. So this unit would be completely new and energy efficient. And again, they would do the outside entrance as well as the sidewalk. The entrance for this one is the front parking lot, and that one does not need to be resurfaced because we've already done that. So those are the costs that are included in this, and like I said, it did come in at 1.36 million. So it worked out as we anticipated. So really, that's all I have. This is the only update that I have, is the cost. Yes?
I noticed that the design fees are not included in this. Are they included in the 1.36?
No, that would be out of our own money.
You have
The
any
committee decided to do it out of our own money, 80,000.
80,000.
It would not be a part of the loan.
Other questions for Melissa?
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Mr. Steingraber is coming forth to give us a highway update, and he's going to pass the hat around for some funds.
Thank you, Mr. Keppen, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This morning, hopefully you saw on your desk there our very first newsletter, and take a look at it. Hopefully we'll be able to keep this thing going on a twice-a-year basis. Just giving you a little information on what's going on at the Highway Department, and we'll be sending this out to all the municipalities as well, and anybody that's interested in it. So in there we have a small article, short article on winter maintenance. It's on the first page, starts on the first page, and it's on the bottom, and we get into where we are through the month of January as far as winter maintenance. Last Highway Committee meeting, the Highway Committee says, Dean, you better get out there and tell the county board where everything is as far as winter maintenance. We're in trouble. We've been doing a lot of work out there. This year, article in the month of January states that there was 25 snow-related incidences where we had to respond to. 10,000 ton of salt and over 10,000 ton of sand salt were put down, and we spent $727,000 on state and county highways. We also spent another $179,000 for towns, cities, and villages. Of that 727, about 300,000 is for the state, and we get paid for that. And the 179,000 for the cities, towns, and villages, we get paid for that. But it just gives you a little bit of an idea how much money is being spent out there and keeping the roads clear. Roger and I were talking in the back there. I'll be the first to admit we're not perfect. We don't have every road bare all the time, and we do our very, very best on those main roads. I know we've had different instances throughout the winter here where maybe Highway 10 wasn't perfect, and some of the county highways weren't either. But for the most part, we do a pretty good job, and we're very proud of our guys and what they're doing. But we just wanted to give you an update here. Got the latest and greatest number here this morning, through the weekend. on the county trunk highway, get ready, $514,000 spent on the county trunk highway system. We about 120,000 of that is sand, salt, and salt, just the materials itself. We've done everything we can here, probably since December, not to put salt down on the county trunk highway. Why? Because we just don't want to use salt, because it doesn't work as efficiently. When you get really cold temperatures, salt doesn't work as well. So we've been using sand salt more on the county trunk highway system. So therefore, we're pretty good. We have a pretty good inventory right now of salt yet for the county. On the state side of the system, we're not doing so well with salt. So we got a feeling by the end of the winter here, our amount of salt will be contributing and giving and selling some of our salt to the state to be used out on the state highway system. So those are some numbers out there. 235,000 of that 514 is just an equipment alone. So that's the trucks, the graders, the plows, all that, and the loaders, all that kind of stuff. 235 and 133,000 is in labor. So that's the latest and greatest. Want to just throw it out there if you have any questions for me at all.
Questions for Dean? Mr. Jonley?
Dean, I think maybe you just should make mention when you talk about sand salt mix, the percentages of sand and salt.
As far as how much salt is in that sand salt mix, yeah, we're right around that 8% mark is what we're shooting for. 8% is of salt inside that sand salt mix. So it's mostly sand. We put the salt in there not for the melting, but to keep that sand from freezing up like a rock. And that allows it us to put it in the dump trucks and run it through the sanders and have it so it can come out so we can spread it on the roads.
Mr. Fleece?
I'd like to thank Dean for coming up with this bulletin, or whatever you want to call it. It's a lot of work, takes a lot of time for his department. We've been talking about it for a long time, and it turned out real good. Thank you.
Pat, over there.
Oh, Miss Pat Gregg?
As part of the motoring public of Waupaca County, thank you. I know that it takes what you said you have, which is dedicated employees, to be out there living on Highway 54. I know every time the snowplow goes by, and I'm grateful that he is and that he does. And you have done as good a job with these horrible conditions of our winter being both cold when they were out there filling the cracks. I mean, that's really tough when it's minus 30 below, but they're out there doing it, as well as being in the trucks that do plow. So thank you from those of us who appreciate being able to get to the courthouse on a day like today.
No problem.
Dean, were those figures you tossed out and in here just for this spring?
Just this year, yes, from January 1 till now, 514,000 in county winter maintenance. That's what now in the article we're talking about January, the first 31 days, and then what I'm giving you here now is just a number that we had run off this morning to see where we're at, and obviously we spent more. The cold weather too. The early part of February, the cold weather was a blessing as far as not having any snow there for a while to plow. We got a little bit of a reprieve. But I'll tell you what, that cold weather is hard on any of the equipment, so we tried as hard as we can to keep very minimal amount of equipment out on the road because it breaks so easily. That's the nature of this business. It's usually not a big money maker. It's a service that has to be provided for people to keep getting to their jobs, getting the businesses and trucks moving along, and that's what we do. Any other questions?
Mr. Barrington?
Thank you. I echo Pat's remarks. I think your crews are doing a wonderful job. I wonder if you could just speak to us a minute on the brine solutions and what effect that has on the roads.
Yeah, the salt brine is a product that's been out there for quite a few years, but it's getting a little bit more traction as far as people are using it and putting it onto their equipment. to be able to put in with the salt and with the sand salt. The salt brine is just water mixed with salt. And what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to apply that right to the pavement so that that salt starts working faster. When you put dry rock salt down onto the pavement, if it's really, really cold and you can't produce any moisture, it'll just sit there or get plowed off, or the traffic will work it off. If it gets wet, it will stick to the pavement, and it will then start melting, ice, salt, or ice and snow, and it'll open up the road. So we've been trying to use more salt brine to make that dry rock salt wet, stick, and start working faster and not get blown off into the ditch, into the streams, into the lakes, all that kind of stuff. So we want it to stick on the pavement and keep working. We have really picked that up. Almost all of our state trucks have salt brine tanks on the back end of the truck, and a few of our county, and we're going to continue to try to do that. Also, salt brine can be used in an anti-icing approach, which would mean putting it down before the snowstorm, before the ice storm, and in one of two things. If a few flakes come down on that salt brine, it may melt, or at the very least, it will make sure that snow doesn't get packed into the pavement. It'll have a little bit of a layer there that'll make it easier for us to scrape off the hard-packed snow. So we've been using it both before storms and in the middle of storms. I just think we have to do even more of that. One of the problems that we have here in Waupaca County, we've got an older facility. You guys all know that. Don't have a lot of space where we are in Waupaca to be able to have the salt brine making equipment or the salt brine storage equipment. So what we do is we run over with a water truck, a tanker, to Portage County where they make it, and then they load us up and we bring it back. So there's a little bit of transportation going back and forth to get that. Someday, if we have more space, we'll have that on site here, and it'll be easier for us to make it and store it and use it. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I want to just say one thing here too, and we really take our job serious, but we're not perfect, and we know there's other people out there on those roads besides the motoring public, and that's Sheriff's Department. Those guys are out there responding to accidents and stuff like that, and sometimes, we have to work together pretty close, and something that isn't always, we're all on the same page, but I know Brad and I have talked a couple times, and we just try to do our very best to hear what they have to say out there, try to respond to that, because we take that pretty serious if someone out there gets hurt, because the roads are slippery, not only the traveling public, but some of our own, people inside our county family. We take it as somebody from our county family, so that's something I know over the months. It's tough. It's tough to do, and I know this past year Highway 10 isn't always perfect, and that's where everybody comes flying on through there, driving crazy. Sheriff's Department can vouch for that. I guess what we ask is just everybody. It's winter. It's not perfect out there. Drive accordingly. Be safe out there. We'll do the best that we can to get the roads in a good position and good shape. Sheriff's Department's got to respond to every accident, and they don't like being out there either. So just ask the motoring public and spread the word out there. Please be safe. Take it easy. Go a little early. Be careful out there, because it's not perfect. This morning here now, a couple people have mentioned to me they heard that a bunch of cars in the ditch out on Highway 10 this morning, and I just talked to my people, and our guys have been out there 24 hours. They've been out there the whole night, and using salt. It's good temperatures here right now to be using salt. So you think you got everything under control, and it's wet and all that kind of stuff, but it isn't over 32 yet. So it's under 32. It's going to maybe freeze again. And what happened is a fog kind of rolled in a few isolated spots and froze over again. And then all of a sudden cars are coming along 65, maybe 75, and then all of a sudden they hit that spot and they wipe out. Hopefully they don't get killed, but hopefully they isn't that real serious. But I'll tell you what, it's dangerous out there. And then the sheriff's department has to respond to that. We respond to that and try to get it back under control. And it's just a tricky little business. But we're out there right now, and I think right now 10's back under control again. But a few minutes later, it might not be again. So, yeah, and again, how much you got to always kind of weigh how much money you're going to put into it, how many trucks you're going to have out there. You know, you see the numbers here, and there's got to be some reasonableness here by everybody too. So, if anybody has any suggestions, let us know. We're always open for suggestions. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean, for your nice report. And also, I agree, the newsletter is fantastic. What I like best about it, it says spring 2014. Just an update about those of us who attended the legislative exchange in Madison, which was the 4th and the 5th. Fellow supervisors John Penny, Gary Barrington, Fred Zog, Mary Kay Pullman, and Carl Keitzman attended. And I know Carl isn't here, but after I get giving a general report, I'll have each one of those who wants to give an update on the legislative exchange, please do so. In my 10 years of going to the legislative update down at the Concourse Hotel, which is meant to mingle with the legislators and visit the Capitol, or they're visiting us during social hour on Monday evening, I really consider this one of the finest exchanges we ever had. The presentations were outstanding, a little humor in it. Of course, it's always humorous when the state's almost with $1 million surplus. We had the Dems and the Republicans doing roundtable discussions of how to deal with the surplus, where it should go, and all that type of thing. And there were some very humorous remarks made with that, mostly serious, of course. But all those things are very interesting. We heard presentations from leaders around the state, and of course the WCA staff, whose principal thing is lobbying over at the Capitol. And we've got some excellent people at WCA office these days. And Mark O'Connell, of course, was at his best, giving a 25-minute presentation, and which was very informative. We also had federal updates from Deb Cox, who's the Director of Legislative Affairs for NACO, and what's happening in Washington that's affecting the United States counties all over the United States. Good stuff, very educational stuff. The year I served as president of the WCA, I was out there 3 times and had a lot more information and gathered a lot more information and knowledge of what is actually happening in Washington. And however, many of the same problems federally is the same with the states, such as the gas tax funds not covering our roads and those types of transportation funds, because we're all driving smaller cars and using less gas, and we share many of the same problems. One presentation was that by the WCA is pushing for collaboration in IT departments. There are a number of counties now in the state that are collaborating together, sharing various software programs and working together and saving money so each county doesn't have to purchase their own. And Liz Stevens is a program development director for WCA and gave an outstanding presentation with that. One thing I'm going to really ask you to do is go on the WCA website. I don't know, how many of you actually check out the WCA website? A few of you. Please do. It's an outstanding website with tons of information about what's happening down at the Wisconsin Counties Association and benefit for the 72 counties. And it also gives information what the various boards are doing, steering committees are doing, There's one whole column on Mark O'Connell's presentations. He has a regular radio program in Milwaukee every Saturday. You can tune into that. He has many actually famous guests, noted guests that he talks with, and it's very, very good stuff. I remember my year as president, Mark came to me and wanted this new website, and it was going to run close to $50,000, and wanted to know if I'd back him on that, which I did, and I'm sure glad that we went through with that website. It's just one of the most outstanding websites I've seen. It should be for that money. Also on February 13th and 14th, your chairman attended my second Wisconsin Counties Mutual Insurance Board meetings, and that was held in Warren, Wisconsin. I don't know if you ever heard of Warren, Wisconsin. Way over on the west side of Wisconsin, beautiful area. And since I am new on that board, I generally kept my mouth shut and listened and tried to learn a lot, because the insurance game is a whole different ball game for me, but it is very interesting. And all I can say is mutual insurance is doing very well, insuring we counties and many school districts now since Act 10, and also many municipalities. We invested wisely. Of course, the market was up over 30% last year, and Mutual made over $1 million in increases in their investments. Quickly, I noticed that some of us have health challenges, and sorry to hear about Mr. Sorensen's, the last one. And of course, Mr. Mares has gone through some, and Mr. Kussman and Mr. McClone had a thank you note in there. All of us have something wrong with us someplace or another, and many of you are asking questions about me, where I am at, and I've been kind of quiet lately because I didn't have anything to report. But I'm still in my fight with, I'm still in treatment with Mayo Clinic. I go there every 3 months and mail them lab tests overnight, and they keep a quick watch on me. I had beaten cancer twice, and it seemed to come back last October. And then I headed back to the Mayo Clinic for another program of trying to cure this particular cancer, which I'm on now. So I went back the day after Christmas, and they put me on a hormone treatment program, and has brought my cancer count way down, which is really good, but it's got just terrible, terrible side effects, as any of you on hormones know. But that's okay. We can put up with those side effects as long as it keeps the cancer at bay. It does not cure cancer. It keeps the cancer from growing, and it knocks the count down to where it will not multiply. But that's the first step. They're also telling me that maybe in months to come, I should undergo surgery, and they cryogenically freeze those little devils in there that cancer cells that refuse to die. He said, I've got some stubborn buggers on there, so that's the next step. But right now, I'm just working with hormones. I will be returning to the Mayo Clinic on April 29th, 30th, and for 3 days in that area. So that's my situation, and I feel fine, except like Mr. Kussman did, I bummed out a hip last fall golfing, and now it's in my back, and I got trouble getting around. So it's nothing to do with my other problem. It's just another problem. I do have a cane hanging in the closet, Dennis, so I think I'll have to get it out. So I want to thank all of you, too, for your thoughts and prayers. I've received some cards and calls and concerns personally, and gosh, I want to thank you a lot. It really means a lot. It really means a lot to me. And where it really means a lot is I'm sitting over at the Mayo Clinic, waking up at 2, 3 in the morning and worrying, and I think of you people and your pleasant thoughts, and it really means a lot. So let's get on with the legislative. Mr. Penny, would you like to come up and say a few words?
I think first and foremost, I'd like to let all of you know that today is election day, primary election day, and make every effort that you can to get your polling places. I know in our county, other than the judgeships and a few school districts, there's not too much on the ballot, but it is important that you get out there and vote today because it's only a few more weeks down the line on April 1st, and many of you here today are going to be on that ballot. And Dick has mentioned a couple of things that I was going to bring up. It was just 2 weeks ago today that we were at the concourse, and the attendance on this particular session that we had down there on the forum was really great. I think there were probably more people there than have been there in past years. And from that standpoint, it really went well. It was about 2 full days of different people getting up and expressing their views, and the politicians were there, not as many as before. The governor usually talked, but he wasn't there this year. I don't know, he was out of the city. And we were at the Concourse Hotel, which is right on the square in Madison, right across from the Capitol, and easily accessible for those people that work in the courthouse to come over and address us. Dick had mentioned that there was a representative, a lady there from NACO, the National Counties Association, and she did a nice presentation of what's happening, some of the things they look forward to in the Capitol over in Washington, and she did a nice job for us, and also told us tried to convince the many counties that aren't part of NACO to join, and there are some benefits there that really help the counties out, as we know here in Waupaca County. And we did have this one presentation. They had the Republican and Democratic minority leaders there from the House and also from the Assembly, and they got up there and they had a narrator that asked questions, and here again they always say, well, we're going to be very, very nonpartisan and get together on all these issues, but you know it isn't going to happen. And the biggest concern they had is what they're going to do with this big surplus of money that the state has right now. And so we listen to them. Besides that, and this wasn't even on the agenda for the entire 2 days, but there was a concern at that time about the amount of propane that is being used in our state and other states, and this was an issue. They had a fellow came over from the Emergency Government Department and spoke to us on that, and they tried to attribute the great use of it this past winter on the fact that there was a bumper crop of corn and a late bumper crop of corn, and you know, propane is used to in these big dryers for the drying of the corn, and they tried to lay the shortage basically on that. And I know Bill Jonley can probably he knows more about it than I do, but that's what they tried to attribute it to. And propane comes into the state of Wisconsin by 3 different sources: by truck, or by rail, or by yeah. And the use of it with from the biggest thing we have to worry about, it was the fact that the supplier of our propane usually comes from the state of Kansas, and Kansas, as you recall, had a bigger problem with propane, had a bigger problem than we did, and as a result, these pipelines were pretty well plugged up. And the north-south pipeline, which goes through the state of Wisconsin, comes from up in Canada, and they had some problems up there where there was a rupture or something, and that cut things down considerably. But since that time, and we're only 2 weeks down the line, back at that time the cost was something like $6 or $7 a gallon, and now as of yesterday it's down below $3 again. So I think talking to some of the people that deal with propane, they didn't think in a lot of ways there was a shortage, and they thought that there was some of these people that really made a ton of money over the propane bit of it. And the one thing that was just touched on briefly, which I think was the most important thing that I got out of the whole session, and that is the use of heroin by our young people and some of our other citizens of our state and all the other states. It has put tobacco and has put cigarettes and marijuana on the back burner. And because of the great use of it now, it's got to the point where it's being processed so rapidly that the prices came down, and these young people are using it. And if you read the papers last year in the county of Marathon, there were 18 deaths that were contributed to the use of heroin. And this is something that we're going to be faced with, and it's very, very important. And now there's something that came. There's a new deal now where you're able to purchase across the counter some type of drug, non-prescription drug that they can mix with it that is absolutely deadly. And like I said before, a lot of those deaths are attributed to the heroin itself, and many of them are also addressed to the contamination of the needles that they use for it. So this is something that we certainly got to be aware of, and I'm sure the Sheriff's Department knows a lot more about it than I do. And if you read the Appleton paper in the last few months, you see a lot of these obituaries that list the names of girls and boys that are 17, 18, 19 years old, and it doesn't give the cause of death. But in most of these cases, it's attributed to heroin. And like Dick said, we did have on Monday night, all the representatives from the various branches of government were invited over to a little get-together at the concourse. And it was kind of nice. It's an annual thing, and Kevin Peterson was the only one that was there from our district. I don't know what happened to Senator Luther Olson. He hasn't been there in the last couple of years, but we sat around at a table with him and asked a lot of questions and things that he had let us know about what he felt were progressing inside of our county. Other than that, I guess I don't have much more to say. There were a couple things that were brought out there that might be interesting to you. That one of them is the debt on credit cards in the United States. The average debt on credit cards in the United States is $7,100 right now. And another thing that really baffled my mind is the fact that for the state of Wisconsin to house one male prisoner in our institutions, it costs us $35,000 a year. $35,000 a year. And for a woman, it is $41,000 a year. So you can see where a lot of our tax money is going. Another thing there, one other thing I forgot to bring. There was a presentation there by two political science professors from the area. One was from the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, and the other was from Marquette University. And the guy from Marquette University, that professor, was the one that puts out these surveys and questionnaires about who's leading and who's going to be the most outstanding candidate. And if you recall, just lately, I think the last one was 47% was favoring Governor Walker and 41% was favoring Mrs. Burke. And this was quite interesting. Those guys were really sharp. I'll tell you that much. And as I sit down, I'm just going to give you this as add a little humor to this. Is that there was one senator there that was trying to introduce a bill to open a sandhill crane hunting season in the state of Wisconsin. And when he got through with his presentation, one of the other senators asked him, he said, "Are sandhill cranes good to eat?" And he said, "Yes, they are good to eat." He said, "What do they taste like?" He said, "They taste just like a bald eagle." And with that, he defeated himself, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penny. You know, that guy is amazing, because I sat next to him during this whole thing, or very close to him. He never took a note. He never took a note. And look at the information he gave you. Wow. Mary Kay, would you like to mention something?
Do I need to get up?
Yes.
Lower this to my height. I really can only echo what Jack had to say. He covered pretty much all of the conference, and just wanted to let you know in 10 days I am heading to Washington to join in on the legislative conference out there for a week, and my first meeting is a breakfast roundtable to discuss the Affordable Care Act. And then we'll also have the ability to meet with our national representatives at the Capitol if those meetings can be set up during their following sessions of action. So in that note, that's really all I have to comment on.
Thank you, Mary Kay. And have a good trip, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Mr. Barrington.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The advantage of speaking last.
Oh, we got Fred
There's
yet.
nothing left to say, right? As most of you know, I'm not here this month. So this was my first legislative conference. It's probably one of the finest conferences that I've ever attended. I was just amazed at the face-to-face we had with everyone and how open they were expressing their opinions. We didn't have to go through several layers of aides, and we were able to go one-on-one with them. There was also some humor. Those of you that know Senator Mike Ellis and have listened to him in the past, the guy is fantastic. I don't know, I've known him for a lot of years. Competed against him when he was at NINA. I always kid him about sneaking into New London in the middle of the night and stealing one of our prettiest girls in town, Dr. Smallberg's daughter. And of course, we had many conversations about that. They usually result in a lot of laughs. Like I said, Dick and Jack covered it well. We did talk to Mike Ellis. We did talk to our local rep, Mr. Peterson, and I think we've come to some similar conclusions. I guess I would really strongly recommend that the rest of you attend this conference. This is a fine conference. I know some of them we go to don't turn out well, but this one certainly did. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Mr. Zog.
One thing I'd just like to add, what I usually do, this is my second time at one of these, I usually try to corner some of the legislators I know, not necessarily Kevin or Luther, but other people I know, which I did this time with John Nygren and with Mike Ellis, essentially saying on this, they're talking about this tax cut because of the $100 million surplus and so forth. And I think it came out to like $43 or $47 per person. I said, instead of that, how about helping the transportation budget? And I guess they thought a little bit about it, but as I pose, what's 40 bucks going to do for us when there's all kinds of transportation or highway projects that could be done in the state? Other than that, the other thing, a nice talk with Jim Duncan, who's in Outagamie County, and Tom Snyder in Winnebago. It's nice to figure out and talk to these other people as well, because they can fill you in on what they're doing in their counties. Might be similar or different than what we do. And but the key thing is to get a hold of your legislator and corner them and you know, talk to them and kind of like lobby yourself. I also talk to them quite a bit, either by email or by phone on a monthly basis. So, but it's well worth the time. And next year, why don't you all plan on going to it?
Thank you, Fred. With that, we'll take a short break. Board of Ordinance. Item A, Chapter 32, Shoreland Zoning Ordinance Amendments. Ryan, you probably want to come forth, please.
Okay, so this is the amendments to our existing shoreline zoning ordinance. The existing ordinance was passed in 1997. This is being done in response to administrative code, NR 115. We're doing this for consistency with that code. We had already done some revisions on this earlier this year in response to Act 170, handling nonconforming structures. That's already gone through by the county board. So this here is just the final revisions to the ordinance. We created a shoreline advisory committee, and they have met, was it 10 meetings, 10, 12 meetings, something like that? And we went through basically page by page with this ordinance, and through the use of that advisory committee, we made all the necessary changes, and that's what you have in front of you. Is there any questions on the what you have in front of you, or some of the changes?
I'd like to get a motion before we have any discussion or questions. Mr. Ellis?
I would move we adopt this ordinance as written.
So motion by Mr. Ellis for adoption, and a second by Mr. Kutzman. Now, questions? Mr. Fleece?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to bring up 5.58 View Corridor. What I'd like to bring up, there was a total of 12 meetings. After about the fourth meeting, to start out with, this committee was set up. I live on the Wolf River, have a lot to do with the water. I didn't even know about this. I didn't even know this was going on until the third meeting. I called Chairman Kussman and I asked him. He says, absolutely, you can be on the committee. You should have been on it from the beginning, but I wasn't asked. It was discussed 5.58 after about the fourth or fifth meeting. It was discussed at length a long time at the meeting, pretty near the whole meeting, and was voted on option one of the sheet I passed out. They kept coming back for about the next 3 or 4 meetings about 5.58 because certain people on the committee didn't get what they wanted. Most of the people on the committee were from the Waupaca area, Chain of Lakes, very few people throughout the county. The Chain of Lakes has 22 lakes, 724 acres, 9% of the water in the county. They got 90% of the say-so. The Chain of Lakes share a watershed with Portage County that is less restrictive. This rule is not about me. It's about the people I represent and allow me for the last 20-odd years to sit in this chair. And I'm going to fight for them. In the future, when you come up with a committee like this, let's have balanced representation. 1 vote each district. Just about every district in the county has a lake or a trout stream. Majority of those people, I have a map for the county, and it doesn't take a Philadelphia lawyer to find out what districts have water or a trout stream in them. They're not all in Waupaca area. I don't think the county board chair would give these 3 people sitting next to me from New London and put them all in the same committee. I know better than that. Why would you do that for the Shoreline Zoning Committee? Washington and Madison makes rules we don't like, but we're sure sticking something to the people of Waupaca County on this one. I'd like to give you a good example. Bill Jonley represents lots of water, from Gills Landing to Fremont, the lake in Fremont. I said, Bill, did you hear about this? Nobody contacted me. We have a Wolf River Preservation Association that's been together for close to 50 years. I asked the chairman of that committee. He didn't know anything about it. I don't understand this. The Wolf River Preservation is from New London to Fremont. All municipalities, townships, City of New London, the town of Fremont. The Wolf River has 41%, 23 miles of shoreline, 46 miles of shoreline. The entire county lies within the Wolf River watershed. I want to make an amendment. I laid a sheet on the paper, everybody's desk. The top of the sheet is what the shoreline zoning come up with. This is what they recommended to bring to the county board. When they had a hearing, a few people showed up and got them to change it. You can't do nothing in that view corridor now but what they were allowed to a little bit in the view corridor before. I'm going to make a motion to change it back to item 1 on top of that sheet, to put it back so that people can do a little bit in this view corridor. I think the sheriff has got enough to do without having his deputies run around with a ruler in their squad car and measuring that it's not more than 30 feet. This is ridiculous. I make a motion to change 5.58 back to what the Shoreline Zoning Committee come up with.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Second by Supervisor Penny.
I don't want to get into personalities, but this is what it amounts to.
Discussion? Mr. Ellis?
Can I come up there? Good morning. Before I start on shoreline zoning, everybody's been talking about health issues. I just wanted to point out one thing to everybody. Start watching out for ticks. Whenever you go out in the woods, go out in the garden, put something on. My wife came down with one of the most deadly tick-borne diseases last fall. This month she's finally up and running. It's been since September. 6 days on morphine so that you could continue to live is a tough way to go, followed by enough antibiotics so that I've got my own built-in 401k of pills sitting at my house if I choose never to take them and sell them instead. So if in doubt, be very careful in the woods. Guard yourself carefully, inspect yourself carefully, because the type of tick-borne disease that my wife went through is the kind that will harvest you if you're not lucky. Another lady, also named Kay, 3 months prior, dodged death by about an hour. So the bugs are out there. Keep an eye on those. Sorry for the health warning. I'm here to answer Mr. Fleece's comments. I'm the guy who, after the public hearing, suggested an amendment to the shoreline zoning ordinance as we had done it through the advisory committee. The advisory committee met for a long time, 10 or 12 meetings, 2 hours apiece. A lot of them, one of them was under-attended because we didn't have a quorum. The bottom line is a lot of people were there who kind of didn't want to be there, and a lot of people were there and didn't say much. The conversations were largely controlled by 5 or 6 speakers. And most of those speakers had nothing to do with the Channel Lakes, who apparently is the guilty party here. I'd like to point out one other thing. Here's this very nicely written Waupaca County Land Atlas and Plat Book. Top picture on the front page is a trout stream or the Crystal River or the Little Wolf. On the back, same big picture. This is what the county wants itself to look like. Tourism is very important in this community. Keeping it green has a whole lot to do with tourism. Choose to believe that or not. If you took a look at the picture on the front and then imagined a 100-foot section chopped out of there, it wouldn't look as pretty as the thing on the front of your book. Waupaca County wants to look like this, portrays itself as looking like this, and by moving the corridor, the view corridor wider, by putting a number on a law page, on a piece of paper here, we've allowed anybody that has more than 335 feet of water on the water to chop 100 feet of trees down. If their house is a quarter mile back, they're going to chop 100 feet times a quarter mile back. And if that's 5 trees, fine. If that's 5,000 trees, that's bad. That clear cutting then turns around and creates erosion, creates silting in. If you put a lawn in, you've gone over the top in terms of helping to make the river bad. Since this law was passed, and since we got our new conservationist that same year, this county has spent over $9 million working with farmers and other folks like that on getting runoff out of their farmyards, getting manure into a storage area rather than a ditch, because every ditch leads to a stream. Every stream leads to a river. So having spent $9 million over the last 10 years, and there are big projects going on now up in the Pigeon River area near Clintonville, the point is that we're spending big money to try and keep the rivers clean, but once we get them all cleaned up, it's okay to just start chopping away on the sides, which then starts creating the problem at the place where we've just tried to clean up. I think that's vital. I think it's a privilege to live here every day. We don't go to Florida. We don't escape Waupaca. This is a wonderful place to be, and it's a privilege to be here every day. It's a beautiful place. People tell me that all the time. We have an opportunity to keep the law, the restriction, the same as we have for the last 15 years. There's been only one complaint in 15 years. NR 115, after DNR looked at how well Waupaca had created its ordinance, NR 115 was the DNR's attempt to bring 69 other counties into some kind of compliance with some kind of shoreline zoning ordinance. The only other county in the state that had an ordinance similar to ours was one that Door County took and used and Xeroxed from us a few years after we'd established ours. They liked it so much they realized there was a lot to protect in Door County. It was a tourism county, and therefore they adopted our law. The DNR liked our law so much they fashioned NR 115 after it. And then because the DNR is a big group, and because politics are very important in Madison and places like that, with the new appointment to a different person running the DNR, whose husband happens to build high-end homes on waterfront, he started helping her change her mind about the law. Next thing you know, the lawyers and the realtors got a hold of it, and it got liberal and more liberal and more liberal, because the thought was we got to have one law that's going to fit all. And so DNR got watered down. It took 10 or 11 years for it to even get to the point where it's ready to be in place. So it's the minimum standard for everybody who has none. And the law requires that anybody who wants to make a more restrictive zoning ordinance can. This little section in question, 5.58, the place that's punitive, the place that's bad, is the DNR decided they're going to put a rule in that says 30% of the width of your lot to a maximum of 200 feet. Most of my neighbors have a lot that's 50 feet wide. 30% of that is 15 feet. And who's going to run around and enforce that? Lord knows we can't have the zoning department try and figure that one out. But the other side of it was they allowed people with huge lots to go up to 200 feet. Those huge lots aren't on lakes like where the chain is. They're over in Muckwa, where there are big expanses of water. There isn't any doubt that the chain is a drop in the bucket compared to the rest of Waupaca County. My motion was not for the chain because it almost doesn't apply to any of the tiny lots where we live. It applies to the entire county. And keeping from ripping down tens of thousands of trees just because this number on this page says, yeah, you can do it. You know, if I get crazy and buy 5 new chainsaws at Fleet Farm and send my grandsons out, let's see what they can do. I mean, zoning is not about personal preference. It's about ensuring that the shoreline and the waters stay as good as they can be. Everybody knows Aldo Leopold. One sentence on him and I'm out of here. It said, we abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community, to which we belong, we begin to use it and love it and respect it. So that's why I did this. It's not making something more restrictive. It's the same that we've been putting up with for 15 years with only one complaint. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I'd like to answer you, Mr. Ellis. You say it's no more restrictive. The top one says you can do a little something in that 30 feet. The bottom one says you can't do nothing. That's my point. That is my point. You're the one that's pushed this. I don't want to bring up personalities, but you're the one that pushed this rule. People are sick of it. The DNR, everything is a DNR. Well, you see what happened when the governor brought a guy up here from Texas with the hunting rules. They found out he knows more about it than the DNR because they're making an awful lot of changes. And I've been told in a couple of years they're going to make a lot more changes to the shoreline zoning rule that we're arguing about. That's my point.
I have no idea how to answer that.
I look at this as someone that lives on Shadow Lake, and I love looking out at the lake. I don't want to be restricted to 30 feet, if I'm understanding this correctly.
It wouldn't apply to cities or villages.
No. The city has its own shoreline zoning ordinance.
Any other questions? Mr. McClone.
I don't know if this is a question or not, but I have a cabin in Ashland County, and my structure is beyond 40 feet from the water, but less than 75. And they adopted some bylaws similar to this, that if I want to add on to my cabin, I have to let my frontage go to only 30 feet open. Well, I have a park. I have 187 feet of frontage, which is gorgeous. So would I add on to my cabin to give up my park? Absolutely not. I don't want a mosquito haven. I totally support what Mr. Fleece has said, and I won't increase the property tax on my facility because I won't add on. And I think we need to make our waterways friendly to the owners, and hopefully they'll use some common sense when they utilize that property. But I see on our lake a number of lots that have been built on now. There's only 30 feet open. You can't hardly see the water from your cabin because your boat dock and boat lift holding your boat is in view. You have to see it. When I look at the chain of lakes here, it appalls me when I go out there and see a couple docks ahead of each place and probably 3 to 5 float boats sitting there when they're only supposed to have one. There's a lot of things going on there that bother me greatly. I'm not blaming this on to Mr. Ellis, but the other thing that bothers me when I look at zoning is I come down Highway 10, and this is supposed to be such a great place, but from Fremont to Waupaca, and I look at the billboards, I'm just saying we need more taxes on billboards and less billboards. Thank you.
Other comments before we vote? Supervisor Craig.
Having been on the Shoreland Zoning Committee, there were a lot of issues that we talked about, but there were some that we kept coming back to. And this was one of them. And my attitude is that while the Shoreland Zoning Committee was divided, and the Zoning Committee, when they voted, they were divided, and now that it's at county board floor and we're going to vote on it, we're going to be divided. The ordinance itself is flexible. We are here once again talking about shoreline zoning, and we should be proud of the fact that we did start an ordinance way back when to protect the waters that we have, and that's what this is about. In looking at the idea of 30 feet, it comes from, it has what we have had. If you look under the top part of 5.58 view corridor, if you look at number 2, clear cutting, the last sentence says, the corridor shall be no more than 30 feet wide in the dimension paralleling the shore. So this is what we have lived with for the past how many years? And it was only when the DNR said you can have up to 200 feet that the Shoreline Committee said, whoa, that's too much. So we scaled it back to like the 100 feet. And then at the public hearing, and zoning does this well, they have a public hearing where people can come and say their thoughts on these issues. The people were convinced that the 30 feet that we had was what we should keep. And that's why then the zoning committee decided to go with keeping it at the 30 feet. So I just want to say that our way of government is, and the supervisor referred to the makeup of a committee. We have a lot of ad hoc committees that are not represented by the entire county, because if you did, you would have 27 different opinions instead of 5 or 7 or 12. So just a reminder, I know it's going to be divided, but originally, the way it's written now, we have 30 feet as our maximum for our view corridor. Thank you.
Other questions? Supervisor Boyer?
Could you repeat the motion before we vote?
It's an amendment to the motion.
The motion is to go back to the top of your paper that I passed out.
Under the 5.58 view corridor in red, right?
Can I just ask a question? Do we have two motions on the floor right now simultaneously? I see, okay, okay.
Mr. Morgan?
I believe I hold the distinction of being the longest-serving member on the Wolf River Preservation Association. I started under Gary Wilson, and I think I served under Bob Fleece, and if I'm not telling you the truth, I'd ask him to correct it. We took pride in all those years of accomplishing a couple things. We wanted to protect the environment, but we also wanted to be able to enjoy the environment. We wanted to protect it for other people to enjoy. The state of Wisconsin says that the waters of the state are held in trust for all members of our state. It's everybody. And I took joy in going up to New London every year and looking at those real estates, those beautiful homes that are on the river. Likewise, I do the same on the Chain of Lakes. I always take the chief Waupaca every year for a little trip just to see what's going on. I would feel really disappointed to see that go to 30 feet. I'd like to see it stay at 100. I support Mr. Fleece on this goal, and I think it is more like confiscation without compensation. That's what goes through my mind.
Any other comment before Mr. Jonley?
I don't know if this really pertains to it or not, but I would like to make a comment on Mr. Ellis saying that $9 million was spent on manure storage in the county, but you can reverse that and drive down a river or lake and look at all the nice green lawns, and what a farmer has to do to apply herbicides and pesticides. He has to go to school, be certified, get a license, or he has to hire a certified applicator, and yet the average homeowner can go to Fleet or Home Depot or Lowe's, buy all the chemical he wants, and put it on his lawn to keep his lawn nice and green, and he's living right next to the river. So we got other things that have to be looked at, plus the view and the trees.
Okay, are you ready to vote on Mr. Fleece's amendment? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. The amendment carries 18 to 5. Now we need to move on the main menu as the main motion as amended.
We're voting on the main motion as amended. No discussion. There's no discussion. Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 17 to 6.
Resolutions. Resolution number 13-14, Department of Health and Human Services, full-time position for coordinated service team. Something Chuck's. He's here. So any questions? Mr. Price is here.
Yeah, now therefore, let it be resolved that Waupaca County Board of Supervisors authorizes the Health and Human Services Department to submit an application for a Coordinated Services Team Initiative statewide expansion funding.
A motion for approval by Mr. Gerald Murphy, then a second by Supervisor Pullman. Questions or discussion? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 23-0.
Next item is to ratify the tentative agreement with the Highway Union Local 1756. There's a motion by Mr. Fleece for approval. And a second by Mr. Peterson. Any questions or discussion? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 23-0.
Announcements and correspondence is in your packet. Is there a motion for adjournment? There's a motion by Supervisor Craig and a second by Supervisor Johnson. Please vote.